reunión. Si miran los iconos debajo de su pantalla, el primer punto que estoy mencionando aquí es para que ustedes sepan que vamos a tener una intérprete. Ella también es una panelista, pero ella va a servir de intérprete esta noche y más tarde nos va a acompañar. Pero en este momento, para que ustedes puedan escucharla mientras ella va traduciendo la información, que va a estar solamente en inglés, ustedes pueden mirar el icono hacia abajo de su pantalla donde dice Interpretation, que es el globo. En ese globo ustedes lo van a presionar y ese globo entonces ustedes van a ver otro menú que va a decir el idioma que ustedes quieren escoger, el inglés o en español. Ustedes van a escoger español. De una vez que presionan español, van a entrar a un canal diferente que la van a escuchar a ella, pero todavía van a poder mirar la pantalla. So for the second bullet, if you are joining the meeting from a phone or tablet, these are instructions for families who are utilizing the interpretation screen, actually the services. And so I'm just going to again briefly explain to them how they would actually have access to the interpretation. Entonces, para los padres de nuevo que necesitan traducción, si miran el icono abajo donde dice More, que son los 3 puntitos, esto es otra manera que pueden acceder al servicio de interpretación. Si están usando un teléfono o tableta, esta es la manera que seguramente van a poder tener acceso a la interpretación. Cuando presionan los 3 puntos, van a mirar de nuevo la opción de poder escuchar la intérprete. Okay, write your question in the Q&A. So right now for the rest of this, so for the session, we will be utilizing the Q&A icon at the very bottom of your screen. That allows you to actually write your question. And you can write your question in English or in Spanish, whichever you prefer. And then we will go ahead and actually either answer the questions ourselves, because it depends what the question is. And so we also will wait to see when there is an opportunity to ask the questions out loud to our panelists, and they will be able to answer. But de nuevo, I'm sorry, so the interpreter is on, I'm sorry. The other thing is, if we move on to the next screen, the other icon that you will have access to is raise hand. So for families who prefer to ask their question live, you will go ahead and actually press on the icon, raise hand, and that will indicate to us that you want to ask your question live. So just keep your hand, that icon will stay on up until we actually call out your name, and then we will have you unmute yourself. So we cannot unmute you. You will need to unmute yourself. The chat feature, the chat feature is not enabled right now for you, so you are not able to write any comments in the chat. You will only be able to use the Q&A and raise hand. However, you will see notifications in the chat because we will be utilizing the chat to make any necessary announcements to the attendees. So you will see that you'll see a few notes here and there. So we will try to answer all the questions in the allotted time that we have. So we ask you again for your patience. We're going to try to make sure that our panelists understand again that we have someone that's interpreting the presentation. So that will require the panelists to speak a little bit more slower to make sure the interpreter is able to interpret every information. So again, on the screen now are just again some basic norms. This is a webinar format. And so some of our families that are on the call may be more accustomed to seeing everyone that's on the call. But right now, you will only see the panelists. Again, this is a webinar format. The presenter will try to answer as many questions as I mentioned earlier. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we do have an interpreter. And so we ask for your patience in terms of the pace. Your microphones are all muted. And so again, if you raise your hand, we will request that you unmute your microphone. At the very end of the session, we will request that attendees complete a feedback form, and we will also have a drawing for some fun giveaways. So as soon as our panelists are done with their presentation, we will proceed with the feedback form where we will drop the link on the chat, and we will direct you there to make sure that you can open it up. And it's only 6 questions, so we are requesting that you complete that feedback form. Okay, and then these are the giveaways.
Janet, I'm sorry to interrupt, Janet. It doesn't look like Jamie is in the interpretation room, so I'm not sure we're having the interpretation on yet. I don't know if I'm missing it, but it doesn't seem.
So, no? Jamie, can you hear us? You interpreting? Yes?
I'll take her off now.
Okay, 1 second.
I'm gonna end it.
Go ahead, Jamie. Unmute yourself.
Hi. Yes.
Okay, so did you see? Go ahead.
I'm unsure in which channel I am.
Okay.
I think, yeah.
So you'll see the message that says you have been assigned as an interpreter.
Yes.
So then once you see that, then you are now in that channel. Okay, and then we can't hear you, and you can turn off the video if you like, it's up to you. But as soon as you click on that, you are in the interpretation. And so everything that's being said, you would go ahead and just interpret in Spanish. We can't hear you, but those who have gone into the interpretation feature will be able to hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Entonces, lo que estábamos haciendo era solamente aclarando los servicios de interpretación. Okay, so I just want to make sure that, Jamie, that you did see the request to turn on, to accept as an interpreter. Okay, well, good. Okay, so Derek, I am going to go right ahead. I'm going to just start sharing my screen. Okay.
All right, let me share my screen. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Derek. I am the Day 1 Training and Outreach Coordinator, and I am here with Aaliyah, who is my colleague who also works at Day 1. We're happy to be here with you today, and we will be discussing some online safety and prevention. So throughout the evening, we're going to talk about different things that we can do online. And, you know, if you have any questions, you know, we can try and address those if you'd like to communicate those in the chat or reach out, you know, through the webinar features. We will be happy to do that. So today we're going to cover a bunch of different things. We're going to talk about some definitions. We're going to look at how we use the internet and the different effects of online exploitation. We're going to look at some prevention, and then we're going to talk about mandatory reporting. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Aaliyah.
Okay, so I'm gonna start off by, just kind of defining the problem at hand, and then explaining what child exploitation is. So we know that today, right, technology is ingrained in pretty much everything we do. When we give our online safety presentation, to the students, we ask them how many hours a day they're online. Right? It says on average, teens are online for 8 hours a day, but the reality is now that classes and stuff are online, it's probably close to like 15 hours or as many hours as they're awake when you account like video games and social media and all that stuff. So when we talk about, the dangers of being online with our students, we talk about, things that they post, how the things that they post can be used, and just give them overall tips, right, to increase their safety online. So when we talk about child exploitation, we're really talking about, the act of using a minor child for profit, labor, sexual gratification, or some other personal or financial advantage. So this could be through the use of imagery, information, and it usually involves some form of manipulation that can be force, fraud, or coercion. And these things are done to get, oh, I'm getting the timeout sign.
We're all set. You can keep going.
Okay. These things are usually done to get something in return from the child. This could be, when we talk about labor, we're talking about using the information presented to get the child to do some form of work. Financially, we're talking about getting the child to give over some form of money. Sexual, this could be more sexually explicit images, sexual favors, things of that nature. And then when we talk about, online exploitation, we're talking about the use of social media and online platforms to get this information. So when it comes to online exploitation, oops. All right, when it comes to online exploitation, you're gonna hear us say the word CSAM, which stands for Child Sexual Abuse Materials. So we prefer to use the term child sexual abuse materials because the term child pornography makes it seem as though the child was a willing participant in the development of the materials. And that's not the case. If they're a minor, they cannot give consent. And then we're gonna talk about sexting, which is the act of sending sexually explicit images or messages. And then sextortion would be using sexting and then applying some form of manipulation to that. So I had just mentioned, child pornography before. When we talk about pornography, we're talking about materials that represent and are designed to arouse or give sexual pleasure when the individual reads, sees, or hears it. This could, again, be an image, whether it's an actual photo, a graphically designed photo, a digital photo. It could be a video. Sounds also qualify under pornography. And when it comes to it being online, right, we're talking about it being accessible. A lot of activity that happens online, for the most part, can be anonymous. And there are plenty of platforms for these things to be free, right? You can simply go on Google and Google these things and they pop up. There are plenty of websites that offer access for free.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm resharing. My apologies. All right, there we go.
Okay, so when we talk about, accessibility, right? We're talking about the fact that more people now use the internet, more people now have, access to tablets and cell phones. And so simply doing a Google search, right, makes this widely accessible. And now we're just going to get a little more into like the facts about pornography. So when we talk about, porn sites, right, we're talking about the websites that house these videos and these images, or are made to house these videos and these images. They get more visitors each month than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter. And when you really think about that, you think about, okay, well, how many of us have Netflix or use Amazon Prime or just Amazon ordering services? And it seems like almost half the world is on Twitter, right? So about 1/3 of all web downloads in the US are porn related. Pornhub, which is like the world's leading free porn site, received 33.5 billion visits in 2018. In a content analysis of best-selling and most rented porn films, researchers found that 88% of analyzed scenes contain physical aggression, gagging, choking, spanking, slapping, right? All of these things would be considered kink and are also included in pornographic materials. And then we know that 50% of parents underestimate how much porn their teens have seen, right? And part of that is because, we expect for porn to be sites like Pornhub. We don't necessarily think about movies that might be rated R that say sexual content, right? Violence and things of that nature. But all of those things would be included. So on our next slide, we have a broader definition of what child sexual abuse materials are. So again, these could be images of child abuse and sexual abuse. These could be sexual assault images, exploitive images, explicit images, and edited images. And I think another important one here is they could also be computer generated, right? So we're not, images that have been created are also included in this. So we know that in 1998, which seems like it was a long time ago in the digital age, but it really wasn't all that long ago, we have over 3,000 reports of CSAM imagery. And then a decade later, that soared past 100,000. And then in 2014, it surpassed 1 million for the first time. And then when we look at 2019, we see that it hit 18.4 million, right? So the increase of this material is rising exponentially. Part of it is because, you know, the internet is more widely available, people have more access. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about product and demand a little bit later. So here we have a snapshot image of computers sharing CSAM images over a 1 hour period on April 1st, 2019, right? So all the little dots and stuff represent a certain amount of computers during this 1 hour time period. And then when we look at our next image, we have a 24-hour snapshot. So Derek, go back to the 1 hour one again. So that's 1 hour, and now we have 24 hours. So we see that in a single day, right, there's a crazy amount of CSAM materials being exchanged across the US. And when we say exchanged, we mean both digitally, physically, there's some sort of exchange. The computers are logged into this information. So one of the reasons we go into the schools and we teach about online safety is because we want to do our best to keep this map either the same or to decrease it. Ideally, we'd like to get the map down to 0. We would want no CSAM materials being shared at all. And one of the ways to help decrease the amount of pings on this map is to get our students to be more aware of what they do online, be more aware of their interactions online. And if they see a red flag, be able to identify that and then respond accordingly. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about, you know, the connection, right? So you have commercial sexual exploitation of children, right? So CSEC is the main umbrella. And then CSAM is a portion of that, right? So typically there is some sort of monetary value placed alongside these images. And these images are also just one of many ways for perpetrators to manipulate and control children. So when we talk about CSAM, we're really talking about the umbrella topic of sextortion and sexting. CSAM is closely related to pornography because, as discussed, it can be found on many popular porn sites. However, when it comes to child pornography, we prefer to say CSAM because children cannot give consent, right? They're not willing participants of what is happening. So now we're going to get a little more into sexting and sextortion, right? So when we talk about sextortion, we're talking about the use of sexual images as a form of manipulation and blackmail, right? So typically sextortion occurs online. It involves non-physical forms of coercion. So when we think about physical forms of coercion, we're really thinking about like someone saying, do this, or I'm going to punch you in the face. When we talk about non-physical forms of coercion, we're really saying like, do this, or I'm going to show this image to the whole school, or I'm going to tell your parents about this. There's some form of manipulation that the child doesn't want, that they're going to use to get them to do something that they want. And this can happen to acquire more sexual content from the child, obtain money from the child, and maybe even engage in sexual acts with the child. And one of the things, you know, we teach our students to look out for is catfishing. So catfishing, I know most people, you know of the big TV show Catfish on MTV, at least our students do. And we really stress to them that, you know, it doesn't always have to be some grand reveal, right? That this person pretended to be someone of a different gender, different age for so many years, right? Sometimes catfishing can be as simple as, if you're 54 and you're pretending to be 16, that's untrue. Or if you're 16 and you're pretending to be 21, that is also untrue. Catfishing is portraying yourself to be anything but what you are online. So when it comes to, the occurrence of sextortion, right? This is typically when, we get the wide eye from our students is when we say, in 42% of reports, offenders use up to 7 platforms to communicate with a single victim. So later on in the presentation, we'll talk more about social media platforms, but this statistic right here means that they've used someone's Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and other social media sites, to contact just one individual. And then in 80% of incidents, the offender blackmailed the victim within the same day of contacting them. This means the same day that they received that sexually explicit photo or message, they have used that as a form of blackmail. Okay, at this time, does anyone have any questions to kind of drop into the chat or the Q&A section?
So, Malia, there are no questions right now, but I just wanted, if possible, if you could just explain again catfishing, because
Yes.
students are very much aware of catfishing. I guess if you can just help parents understand the easiest way to understand what catfishing is, like where, because they obviously haven't heard of this term, many of them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So one of the most common examples of catfishing that I can think of is, this idea that we don't really know who we're talking to on the internet unless we've met that person, right? So you could think that you're talking to, let's say you think that you're talking to me, but if you've never met me, I could very well be Derek pretending to be me on the internet, right? So when we think about child exploitation, we think about someone who is over the age of 18, maybe pretending to be 16 or 17 to befriend the child. And that's catfishing because they're not really 16 or 17. They might be 25. They might be even older than that, right? So it's the act of portraying yourself to be something that you're not online. Okay, so now we're going to get into sexting. And sexting is the act of sending an explicit photograph or message via mobile device or any other device. So this could be through text message. In a little bit, Derek's going to talk more about the Wi-Fi messaging apps. It could be through Facebook. It could be through Instagram. And we know that teens themselves participate in sexting. One, to initiate sexual activity. Maybe they're doing it, because they're experimenting with their sexuality. And then sometimes teens do it because they think it will enhance their current sexual relationships. And we caution our students not to participate in sexting because the photos that get sent may also be forwarded on to other people, right? So this idea that there's privacy and anonymity on the internet is not what we think it to be. Just because you send it to one person doesn't mean that it's not going to end up anywhere else. So we share some statistics with our students. We tell them that, 66% of teenagers sext because someone they know requested the picture. This could be a friend. This could be the person that they're dating. And so they send the picture out of, request or comfort. And then we know that 61% of teens sext because they felt pressured into it. Maybe they've been asked more than one time. Maybe they think that all of their friends are doing it, so they have to do it too. Maybe they're in a relationship and they feel like because I'm in a relationship, I should be able to do this with my partner. And then we know that on the receiving end, 1 in 5 people who have received a sext have passed that on to someone else. This could be them receiving the text message on their phone and then showing a friend. This could be them sending it to someone else, maybe even posting it online. And then we know that over 50% of people who have shared the sext have shared it with multiple people. So they're doing more than just showing one friend, right? Maybe they're sending it to a group chat where there's 6 to 10 people, or they're posting it in a forum like Facebook or Reddit or something that more people are going to see. And one of the things that we stress with our students is that if you're under the age of 18, you're a minor. So even if it's a 16-year-old sending it to another 16-year-old, they're still participating in the distribution of child pornography. So now we're going to get a little more into like what the mental health effects of online exploitation are. We know that this can range from stress, anxiety, depression. And when we give these presentations, we really encourage our students to identify a trusted adult in their life. This could be a teacher, a parent, a sibling, anyone that they trust to advocate on their behalf, or simply someone that they can confide in. So now I'm going to pass the presentation over to my co-host, Derek.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Hi, everyone. So we're going to continue our conversation about the mental health effects of online exploitation. Excuse me. So as Aaliyah mentioned, we look at emotional, we look at behavioral, and we look at social effects. We see that there might be anxiety, high feelings of shame or guilt. We might see that there's PTSD. There's that fear, that stress present with a child. We might see secrecy, so they're not really sharing information with their parents. They're keeping their online accounts private. They don't really want to talk about, the different things that they're doing online. We might also see that they don't trust the adults around them, so they don't feel like people are looking out for them. They have trouble confiding in people. These are all the different effects we might see from online exploitation, and that's why it's so important that we have these conversations. Because we see that youth today use the internet in a million different ways. We have kids that use laptops, we have, computers, we have the smartphones, all of the gaming devices. Aaliyah mentioned this earlier, but when we give this presentation to our students, we ask, how many hours a day are you online? And we see at least 8 hours per day. Some kids say 15, 16 hours a day. Teens are constantly online now, right? We see 93% of teens go online. I think that number is a little low. I think that it's probably higher now. But we see that, all of our teens are engaging online. We also see that 63% of teens say they know how to hide their activity from their parents, right? So that is a high number of teens that say they can do things online and not tell the adults in their lives. We also see that 34% of children ages 10 to 17 have received unwanted exposure to sexual material. So that's a really high percentage. And so that's why we tell our students to identify that trusted adult. And that's why we're going to talk tonight about some questions that folks can start asking their kids to kind of see what's going on online and see if there's some safety concerns going on. So on this next slide, we're going to look a little bit into different apps that are used. So we have a lot of different apps on the screen now. We have more that we'll talk about on the next slide. Excuse me. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the concerns we see with these different apps, right? So the first app that I'm looking at is Snapchat. It's in the top left. It's the yellow one with the ghost. Snapchat bills itself as an app where when you send a message or you send a photo, it disappears, right? We know that that's not the case. So we have folks can save those photos. It's called screenshotting, where if someone sends a photo, someone else screenshots it, they can save that photo. We also have recording. So we see lots of different cases where a child might be sending a Snapchat to someone else, not thinking that it can be saved, and the person on the receiving end is saving that photo. So that's our big concern. Oh, we have a raised hand.
Is it Adrian?
Yes.
Hello.
From the lower the top.
Yes. So Adrian, we're going to ask you to please unmute yourself and you can ask your question. Adrian, we're not able to unmute you, so you will need to unmute yourself. Okay, so Adrian, okay, so was there anyone else? I thought I just saw someone. No.
All right. So maybe we can come back to Adrian in a
Yes,
bit.
go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So Adrian, feel free to ask that question. We'll come back to you in a little bit. Continuing on with our apps. So we look at Snapchat, you know, the big concern of those photos that we think disappear, but they don't. And we also look at all the messaging apps. So that's all of the ones we have on the top. We have Kik, we have Signal, we have Viber, WhatsApp, GroupMe, any of those apps that are the messaging apps that we might use as adults, where you don't have to have someone's phone number. You can, you know, have their username and send messages back and forth. And we see that with these apps, there's a concern, just like texting, there's a big concern in terms of sending messages that might not be appropriate. So teens might think if they send something on Kik, because it's not their phone number, it can't be traced back to them. But we see that that's not the case. And so we have a lot of cases where a child sends something on Kik, on GroupMe, and it gets traced back to them. So making sure that those messages on those Wi-Fi messaging apps are appropriate and that kids understand that they can be traced just as easily as text messages can be traced. On the bottom, we have live streaming apps. So this is the whole group of apps. The one you're probably most familiar with is TikTok. That's a big one now, TikTok. TikTok and all of the live streaming apps, including, you know, Instagram Live, anything where they can press a button and they're streaming live to whoever's viewing. The big concerns that we see there are firstly that when someone's on a live stream, anyone can be watching it. So we recommend to our students that if they're on live, whether it's Instagram Live, TikTok, anything, making sure that the things that they're doing are appropriate, that they're saying appropriate things, and that they're not sharing any information that might be personal to them. So they're not talking about where they live. They're not talking about their location or their address. They're not talking about where they go to school. All that different information can be used to identify where a child is, right? And that's not what we want. So whether it's TikTok or any other live streaming app, we try to recommend that to our students that they make sure that they're being appropriate, that they're aware that folks can save those live streams, and that they look at those location services. So for most of the apps that we use, smartphone, and you go into the settings, you can see location services. And we recommend that folks turn those off, because what those location services are is that if someone else has you added on any number of apps, they can see your location. Your location is broadcasted to them. So our children might be using these apps and they might not be aware that they're sharing their location with the people that they are friends with, that they follow. So we really recommend taking a few minutes, going into the smartphone, go into the settings, turning off those location services, disable them, so that way that location is not being broadcasted. And that's especially true for the live streaming apps. Now we're going to look at a few more apps. We have quite a few here that are some of the more popular apps, right? So first we have Reddit. Reddit is an online forum. It's a place where folks can talk about any number of topics, and there's little regulation. They can, you know, post whatever they want. They can share whatever they want, and it's not really moderated. So we see that a lot of kids might be on Reddit. There's a lot of sexual imagery on Reddit. there's a lot of hate speech on Reddit because Reddit is very loosely moderated. So our big recommendation for Reddit is to remind our kids that just because they have an anonymous username, just because they're posting, but maybe they think it can't be traced back to them. Again, everything we post can be traced back to us, right? So with Reddit, being mindful of being appropriate and knowing that, any language that we're posting, anything we're seeing can be traced back to our computer or our smartphone. Next, we have MeetMe and Amino. These are the two apps in the middle. MeetMe and Amino are friend finder apps. So these are apps where you'll link up with someone that you don't know in real life, and it shares your location with that person. So you go on the app, it says, this person is 2 miles away. Why don't you start talking to them? It's a huge safety concern for our kids, right? We don't want them having access to talk to strangers on the internet. So these are two apps that we try to tell folks to stay away from. Then we have Fortnite, or really any gaming app. These are apps where, they might be gaming with someone across the country. They might be gaming with someone they know in real life or someone they don't. This is where it comes into play with what Aaliyah said about catfishing, about someone pretending to be someone they're not. So when our kids are gaming, make sure that the people that they're gaming with, right, are people that they know in real life. That's huge, to make sure that they have that connection. And if they're gaming with people they don't know, making sure that they're being appropriate, they're not sharing personal information, they're making sure to protect their privacy. And then finally, we have Instagram, Twitter, and Tumblr, and Facebook. Although I mention Facebook to the students and they tell me I'm old, so I don't know if it's as commonly used for teens. These are apps where, kids are most commonly on these apps. So we will see live streams, we'll see following, making sure that the folks that we're connected to on these apps are people we know in real life. We see posting appropriate photos, making sure that the content that we're sharing, we're okay being traced back to us, making sure that we're accepting friend requests from people we know, making sure that our location services are turned off. All of the different safety features we've talked about come into play with Instagram, with Twitter, with Facebook. And then finally, we have in the bottom right with the question marks. So it's what looks like a calculator. But in reality, this is something called a Vault app. So the ones that used to look like a calculator are kind of out of style now, but new ones always pop up. This is an app where it disguises itself as something else, but if you click on it, it opens up to a private photo vault. So this can be used for teenagers to store pornographic imagery, any images that they wouldn't want their parents to see on their phone. So how we know to look out for these is if a child has 2 calculator apps on their phone, odds are that one of those is a vault. No one needs 2 calculator apps on their phone. But anything that looks out of place, right? An app on a phone, making sure that we're clicking on those and we're seeing that it's not a photo vault is huge. So, it might not be disguised as a calculator, it might be disguised as something else, but those photo vaults do exist. So when it comes to the apps, we do have this handout that we're going to make accessible to you all after the presentation. And it goes through most of the apps that are commonly used, and it talks about different safety concerns that we've identified. So you can look at the apps that your child might be using and see what maybe some safety concerns are. There's always new apps popping up. There's always new apps that we've missed. So if anyone has any questions about any specific apps, we can open that up as well. And you can feel free to let me know. So if anyone has questions about apps, feel free to raise your hand and we can, you can unmute yourself and then we can ask those questions. So we'll just give it a minute for folks to, if anyone has any questions. All right, if those questions pop up, feel free to raise those hands and we'll keep going. So now we want to talk about having these conversations with children, right? So how do we bring up these topics with our kids? Because we know, like we talked about earlier, that kids are able to do things online and pretty easily hide them from their parents. So we see that the challenges of having these conversations, right, or is it can create tension. It can make things awkward, right? A child might feel like they're being attacked. They might feel like their parents don't trust them, right? There's that fear, there's that awkwardness. We might be worried how a child is going to respond. And we might, want to find that balance, right? We might be fearful of that. But what we see is the benefits of these conversations are they build trust. They identify you as a trusted adult, as a safe person. So if your child sees something online, they can come to you and say, I saw this, and have that dialogue. And the more that we talk about it, the easier it is. So, the first conversation about internet safety can be really uncomfortable, but every conversation after that is a little bit less uncomfortable. It's a little more open, and it builds that connection. So when we look at the comfort, we recommend finding a comfortable place to have this conversation. One that I always mention is if you're in the car with a child, or if you're going for a walk with a child, anywhere where you're not making direct eye contact can be really helpful, because when there's that direct eye contact, the child or teenager might think that they're being, interrogated or they're being grilled, right? But if we have those conversations when we're in the car, we're on a walk, where we're doing something else, so we're not having that direct eye contact, our kids might be a little bit more open to having these conversations. But wherever the conversations are had, making sure it's comfortable and a child feels like they can open up is key. So we put together some internet safety questions that we recommend folks ask, or think about asking to their kids, right? And we know that you folks know your kids better than anyone else, right? So you know how to communicate to your children. These are more recommended or suggested ideas on how to bring up this topic, right? Because this can be a really uncomfortable conversation to have. So a way to start these conversations is to just ask what kids are doing online. So what apps do you like to use, or what app is that, right? What do you like to do online? What's your favorite app to use? And a good tactic for this can even be, kind of playing into that idea that parents don't know what they're doing on the internet. Maybe even saying, oh, you're using that app? What is that? I've never heard of that. I'm so old, right? Like making a joke of it, kind of playing into the idea so that a child might start opening up about what they do on the internet. I spoke to one mom once who, her son loves to beat her in video games. So any new game that he uses, she'll say, I've never played that before. Can you show me how to play it? So she's seeing, the hands-on what he's doing with the gaming sites. So kind of getting that understanding of what apps a child's using, what they're doing online. We also have, some more safety questions about strangers. So, do you ever talk to people you don't know online? Even looking at that friends list and saying, is everyone you're friends with on Facebook, on Instagram, is everyone there someone you know in real life, right? Do you trust everyone that you're connected to online? Is there anyone, messaging you that you are worried about? Is there anyone you feel like you should unfriend or block, right? Even just asking these questions makes a child realize, oh, I can open up about this if there is someone online that's making them feel uncomfortable. We also say, do you know how to report or block someone? So, we always tell our students that if someone's making you feel unsafe, you screenshot those messages, you block that account, and you report that person. When reporting someone online, it doesn't give that person a notification that you've reported them. All it does is it tells the website that that's someone that they need to look out for. So, making sure our kids know how to report. Know that if they run into someone online who's making people unsafe, they know how to report that. We also think about, have you ever seen anything online that you didn't want to see? Have you ever seen anything sexual online that you didn't want to see? Again, these are questions that are hard to ask at the first conversation, but once these conversations start, might open up, right? You'd be surprised by the things that kids see online and that they're able to see online because the internet is so big and so many different things exist there, right? And then finally, having a conversation about cyberbullying. You know what cyberbullying is. Have you ever heard of that? Have you ever been cyberbullied or witnessed cyberbullying, right? All of these questions are ways to get the conversation started. They're not to interrogate or to grill or to, investigate, but they're to open up a conversation. And we'll send out this list after the presentation so folks have access to it. Questions that we might ask about social media, about gaming, we'll open that up after the presentation.
Derek, can I ask a question that some parents may be thinking?
Yeah.
So number 4 on the screen says, do you know how to report, flag, or block people? I guess I'm wondering how do parents find out about blocking websites, the protection? I don't know what you call it, what's the proper way, but in terms of their providers, in terms of cable or what have you.
Sure.
Is that also another suggestion in terms of trying to limit access to certain sites?
Definitely, yes. So we see with the parental controls, some apps have them. Unfortunately, not as many apps have them as probably should. So we see in a lot of cases that if you look in the settings, if your child is under the age of, it can depend on the app, but if they're under the age of 18, under the age of 16, you can go into the general settings, and oftentimes there's a tab or a button that says parental controls, parental activity, and you can look at the different settings specific to, some of the newer apps. Those might not exist. So what we recommend is checking to see if those exist. And if they don't, or if they do, having a conversation with your child regardless, right? Because we might set those parental controls, we might set those filters, but things can always get through. And so we want to talk to our kids too, that if you see something that you shouldn't see, how can you report that? How can you block that? How can you, get that off the screen? But definitely check those settings for those parental controls. Different apps use them in different ways, for sure.
We have another question, Derek. So it's actually a statement, yes. So thank you for this vital information. My question is, how can you make this information available to the public? How often is this meeting? And can you send awareness a few days before the meeting? Thank you. So I just want to tell folks here that this session is being recorded. It's recorded live right now. It will be available in our Providence Parent Academy YouTube page. So I'll make sure to send the link of the actual video, proactively sending it out to families through the Skyward Parent Portal, okay? And so obviously it'll also be available on our website.
Awesome.
Thank you.
We'll also give at the end of the presentation, we'll give our contact information at day 1. So if anyone needs follow-up from our agency or, we'll talk about what we offer at day 1, but folks can feel free to reach out to us as well. All right, so we'll keep going from our safety questions. So when we look at our safety questions, there's a couple other things that we try to recommend that folks keep in mind. The first is the amount of time that a child is spending on devices. This is something where we see that the more a child is online, the more they might be at risk, right? So if you have a child that's using a specific app 10, 11, 12 hours a day, that's maybe an indication that there's something going on there, right? That there's someone they're talking to, something happening that's making them check that app so often. We also see the location, which we've talked about, the location services and the privacy, turning those off, making sure that that location is off. And then being mindful of what friends are posting online. So, You know, if a child's friend is doing something, they might feel like they should do it, right? We also see that we want to set that behavior ourselves. So a lot of times I know parents friend their kids online or they follow their kids, but that means that our kids can see our content too. So if we're posting our location, we're posting, you know, things that aren't appropriate, our child might think, well, now I can post that because mom and dad are posting that because they can see our pages too, right? So being mindful of setting that, you know, balance of what's appropriate to post, what privacy settings are necessary, all of that. We're going to talk a little about some warning signs of online abuse, some signs that mean that a child is abused online. So we might see that this is a child who is withdrawing, not connecting with other kids, kind of taking, you know, steps away from other people around them. They might be a child who has normally been really social and now they don't want to hang out with their friends. They want to stay home and don't want to connect with people. There might be a level of anger or, you know, frustration, irritation. They're acting out differently than they normally do. These can all be signs that, you know, a child's being exploited. And that doesn't mean that one of these things is present and a child is definitely being exploited. But if we several of these things together, they can maybe be indications of that. We also see, you know, mood swings. We'll see outbursts of anger. We'll see irritation and anxiety. Anxiety. So, you know, the child is really nervous to go to school, really nervous to connect with other people, right? There may be some self-harming activities. All of these different things together can be an indication that a child is being abused online, right? So that's why it's important to have these questions, to prepare these questions, these safety questions, so that we can start to understand what's happening, so that a child can open up to us, right? So now we want to move into that. We've been looking at the warning signs, we're looking at the questions to ask. What happens if a child tells you that they're being abused or exploited online, or if they've witnessed something unsafe online? We see that 1 in 10 children will experience sexual abuse before they turn 18, which is a really scary high number, right? But what we see with that is, you know, 1 in 10 children, that means that we might have a child come forward to us that they've been abused. And so how can we as caretakers and as parents respond to that? So some things to keep in mind, like if a child says to you, hey, this is happening online, I saw this online, I sent this online, how do we respond? So the first is that patience, letting a child speak and open up at the pace that they feel comfortable. We also see staying calm and non-judgmental. So it might be the first instinct for a parent to jump to, why would you post that? Why would you send that, right? Because of that worry. But we really recommend taking that pause and letting a child open up and letting a child share with you without judging. We also see the 80-20 rule. So that means listening 80% of the time and speaking 20% of the time. If a child's opening up to you about something going on, we want to listen more than we want to be the ones talking, right? Being mindful of cognitive abilities, being mindful of where a child is at. A 17, the level of language that our kids might have. We also,
Derek, you're starting to freeze.
telling them that you believe them and really hard. Sorry?
Derek, you're starting to freeze.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me switch over. My apologies, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Mhm.
All right. Sorry about that. So we continue discussing disclosures, right? So being open, answering questions when you can, and admitting when you can't. So, you know, I don't have the answer to that question. I don't know about that. I need to look into that. And really, you know, explaining how the process works. So if a child says to you, I've been hurt online, saying, okay, so here's what we can do next, right? We can make sure that that person's blocked. We can make sure you've saved those messages. And we need to report because we are mandatory reporters. And we're going to talk about mandatory reporting in a few minutes. Things not to do when responding to a disclosure. So if a child says to you, I've been abused online, right? We don't want to interrogate them or question them aggressively. We don't want to say, well, why this, why that, why this, why that. That can be overwhelming. And if a child is sharing with you that they've been through something, that's a really hard conversation to have. And it's one that we want to respect and we want to be present in, right? We want to, you know, don't display shock, don't display horror, don't, you know, be so angry, really just listening in that way of hearing what the child has to say. And then opening up about what we're going to do next, right? So keeping that open mind. We see a lot of reasons why a child might not disclose abuse. Some of these factors are, one, that they might be afraid of what happens to them. So they've maybe told, if you tell anyone, I'm going to hurt you, or I'm going to hurt your friends or your family. And they think that they can't open up because they're going to put themselves in danger, right? They might feel responsible. If a child sends something online that was requested, that they were pressured to send, they might think that it's their fault. They don't realize that someone else was pressuring them to send that image or send that message, right? We also see that they might not want to get the offender or the person who hurt them in trouble. Maybe it's a significant other, maybe it's a classmate, and they don't want consequences to happen to that person. Excuse me. They also might feel ashamed, or they don't recognize what they're going through as abuse. So we see why we recommend having those conversations, those questions, is because a child might be experiencing something and they don't realize it's an issue. So you're having those safety questions and you say, hey, what apps do you use? Or who do you talk to on this app? And your child says, oh, I talked to this guy and, you know, we've never met in person. We met online and we talk every day and he's says this and this and this to me. The child might not realize that they're being exploited, but by having those questions and having that conversation, you're opening it up so you can see the red flags and say, okay, my child might not know, but that person could be taking advantage of them, and I need to be mindful of that. Some common reactions that we see from caregivers and from parents, some gut reactions, right? A parent might say, what did I do wrong, right? The answer is you didn't do anything wrong, right? This is something that is developing. Online safety is new, and children are going to see things online that we're going to miss. So we can't blame ourselves for that, right? You know, is my child in trouble? What will people say about my child, right? The biggest concern is the child's safety. So, you know, we want children to feel comfortable coming forward and make sure they feel safe. And the consequences that come from that come second. The first thing is making sure that they're safe. How are you going to talk about it with your family? How can you help your child? What are your next steps? All of these common questions are things that we're going to provide resources for you. So if this happens to your child, you know places you can look, you know things that you have that can support you, agencies like Day One that you can reach out to that can help you through this potentially harmful situation, right? We might see for a parent whose child has experienced something online that they might feel anger, they might feel fear or sadness or confusion, right? This is really hard because we all want to protect our kids in any way we can. And if a child faces something that hurts them, it's hard not to blame ourselves, right? But that's why it's important to be mindful of all of these things so that we can support our kids in the best way possible. We see that in the state of Rhode Island. I mentioned this mandatory reporting, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. In the state of Rhode Island, it's the law that all adults are mandated to report abuse or neglect of a child, of an elder, or of a person with disabilities. So that's across the state of Rhode Island, every adult in the state. And we see that any person who knows or suspects that a child has been abused or neglected has to report within 24 hours to DCYF, right? This abuse or neglect, online safety, and online violence counts as part of that mandatory reporting. So if you know that a child has been sexting, has been extorted sexually online, that you found any child pornography, whether that's something that was sent to them, something they've sent, these are things that we have to report to DCYF. It's the state law, right? And that reporting process, we have this phone number, the 24-hour hotline. We'll give that number again in the resources, but that's something that we come forward with. That's also something that if it's taking place at school or it's involving a classmate, where we might involve a school counselor, school administration, and see how the school can best support our child and our family in that situation. So that's something where you would reach out to, the appropriate school resources that can be there in an investigation and support you and your family if this is something that's happening, right? And again, the ways that we realize this is something that's happening is we have these conversations, we ask these questions, we open up to our kids, and we hope that they open up to us about what they're doing online. We also have the Rhode Island Children's Advocacy Center. So this is a program within Day One. It's a center within our agency. And it's a center that supports children who have been victims of sexual abuse, right? So we support kids across the board. Firstly, we do forensic interviews. So if a child has been hurt or harmed in any way with sexual violence, they can meet with one of our investigators, our interviewers, who will talk through what has happened to them in a way that isn't traumatizing. So it's a way that supports them, that uplifts them, and that makes them feel like they can confide in that person, right? Excuse me. We also have counseling, we have groups, we have assessment. So we want to work with kids who have been harmed by online violence, right? That's something that's very important to us. We also have some general resources that we're going to put out there in these conversations. So we have our cyber tip line. This is a phone number where any instance of child pornography or, child sexual abuse material can be reported. We also have a child abuse hotline for if a child has been abused, if we suspect abuse. There's a national parent helpline. So if you're a caregiver and you are worried about, something that your child is going through, you can call this number and folks will talk to you about how to support you, how you can support your child. We have the Day One Family Advocate. So this is a person who works within our agency and would walk with a family through a process. So if a child has been put in danger in any way, this family advocate is going to be there from start to finish and is going to support the family, make sure the family gets what they need, and make sure the child is supported. We also have some online resources that you can look into with more information on online safety. We have NetSmart workshops. We have Culture Reframed. These are things that have videos, have handouts, have all different information that we can use for ourselves. And if we want to talk about this with our kids, we can use these resources with our kids as well. We also have Internet Matters, and we have Common Sense Media. These are both, again, more resources that can be used to access information on safety. And finally, Day One, we're here to support families and the community in any way we can. So we have our contact information up here as well. And so at this time, I would love to open up the floor to any questions that folks might have. I know we have put a lot of information on the table, so we like to leave a good amount of time at the end of our presentation to open up the floor if you have any questions about online safety.
At this point too, Derek, I just wanted to ask Jamie if she wanted to join the panelists, right, and be able to interpret along with you.
Yeah.
Jamie, if you want to turn on your video, I just want to see you be in agreement. People, okay. So we're gonna turn off the interpretation. Okay. En este momento, le hemos pedido a Jamie que nos acompañe como panelista. Entonces la información se va a ofrecer en inglés y también en español en vivo. Gracias. I did have a question. Actually, I have two because we don't have any right now. We don't have any raised hands right now. Are you able to share if by any chance there are features in different applications perhaps that parents actually have permission or an opt-in feature that if a child actually tries to open up an application that it would require a parent's permission? Is there, and I know you said earlier, Derek, that not everything has, or not all apps have protections like that, but I don't think that's the proper way of asking. Is it an opt-in feature or?
It's not an app. So features like that are wide range. It's not the individual apps that have that control. Sometimes it's the device. So like when we look at things like tablets, sometimes tablets come in a kid's version versus like a regular version. So the kids version already has built-in parental controls that will prohibit the user from downloading certain apps to the device.
Very good.
I believe that there is also a way to do this with a cell phone, but I know that it differs if you have an Android versus an iPhone. And then one of the other things you can do is you can talk to your provider. So like Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile, and tell them that the particular number on the account is a children's number and ask them if there are any parental controls they can put on that particular number.
Okay.
So, no necesariamente.
La pregunta,
¿Hacer la
Jamie,
pregunta en español,
por
Janet,
favor.
para responderla?
Sí, la pregunta que yo hice fue básicamente que si no podían decir si existen algunas aplicaciones o manera de poder asegurar que si un niño quiere entrar a un sitio web, que hay manera que se le pida permiso al padre antes de yo poder abrir ese sitio web.
Okay. Generalmente difieren en cuanto a las
Aplicación.
aplicaciones se refiere, pero hay controles parentales que se le pueden poner a los que son los dispositivos, ya sea lo que es el teléfono o la tableta, y hay incluso tabletas que vienen diseñadas o que pueden ser utilizadas para niños. También usted puede comunicarse con su proveedor de servicios, puede darle el número de teléfono del niño, donde usted puede decir cuáles son las diferentes cosas que se pueden hacer o que se pueden realizar. También dependiendo cuál sea el sistema operativo de su teléfono, ya sea que usted está utilizando un iPhone o está utilizando un Android, van a haber diferentes cosas que usted también podría realizar en ese sentido. I also would like to add, like, I know that right now, like kids, like they're so into Instagram and TikTok. The user age, it is 13 years old. So it's something that we have to keep in the back of our minds. It is something that we feel comfortable enough with our kids playing and interacting with, and just look kind of like at the age range of the user. Hay algo que yo quisiera compartir. Generalmente cuando nosotros hablamos de aplicaciones tan populares como lo que son TikTok y como lo que son Instagram, más o menos la edad de usuario que está aprobada es de 13 años. Entonces es algo que nosotros tenemos también que reflexionar y ver si nosotros nos sentimos cómodos con nuestros niños interactuando con este tipo de aplicaciones, sabiendo más o menos cuál es la edad promedio que tiende a estar en este tipo de aplicaciones.
And if I can just add to that, something that we see that is why we are open about the fact that kids can get around a lot of things, because for a lot of those apps, you have to be 13 or you have to be 14, but the only way to check is you check a box that says, yes, I'm 13, yes, I'm 14. So in many ways, they're not strict about how they verify. So we might have kids who, all you have to say is, yeah, sure, I'm this age, and then you have access to the app. And so like Aaliyah mentioned, some devices have that parental, but unfortunately, there are a lot of workarounds with that.
Hay algunas aplicaciones que la edad es de 13 o 14 años, pero en realidad lo que el niño tiene que hacer, y por eso es que nosotros decimos que en algunas ocasiones los niños saben cómo darle la vuelta al asunto, y es que ellos solamente tienen que hacer un cotejo o un checkmark en una cajita de diálogo cuando están llenando para esta aplicación.
So I guess, the focus of the information you've shared today is just great, because we've already gotten some comments, but it has a lot to do with protecting our students. That's the name of our workshop. I think that also another protective measure is to just also pay attention to the child that actually is an offender or the aggressor. And so when we have parents that are in that situation, that now they're on the other side of not necessarily having a child that was a victim, but was actually the offender. I don't know what's the proper word, but offender or aggressor. What are some advice that you can share for parents that might be in that situation? So I'll translate. So la presentación de esta noche, muy buena información, importante, que este conocimiento nos va a ayudar a todos los padres que tenemos niños ya de 13 años y adelante. La mayoría de la información era para también proveer información para que podamos proteger a nuestros niños, porque la mayoría tienden a ser víctimas. Pero al mismo tiempo sabemos que tenemos padres que tienen niños que ya son los agresores, ¿verdad? Entonces, eso es una realidad. Entonces, le pedí que por favor si pueden compartir información de cuáles son algunos consejos, pasos que un padre puede tomar para poder ayudarse ellos mismos con consejería tal vez, o ayudar a sus niños.
We do have clinical services in our agency. If there is a parent that has like this burning question and is looking like this sexual explicit behavior in their children, or they're encountering something like that, they can definitely get in contact with us. We are also going to put on the chat our helpline, so they can get, if they have like any question, there is something that is going on and I'm not thinking through what is going on, like we can definitely connect them with resources. So nosotros sí tenemos servicios clínicos si hay alguna familia o algún padre que está viendo un comportamiento específico dentro de sus hijos, que tiene este comportamiento sexualmente explícito. Nosotros tenemos servicios de consejerías y servicios clínicos que le pueden ayudar. También vamos a poner en nuestra caja de diálogo lo que es la línea de ayuda de 24 horas. Si hay algo en específico que ellos quisieran navegar, pueden llamar en cualquier momento. Y si ya no sea directamente con nuestra agencia, van a haber recursos disponibles en los cuales nosotros lo podemos conectar.
I would also add that something that with children who might be the aggressors or who might be, sending that material, a lot of times they don't know how the rules work. So when we give this presentation to students, every time we mention that if you're under the age of 18 and you send a nude photo, it's child pornography, you can see the reaction of the kid. They have no idea. So I think something that can be really helpful to parents who have a child that might be sending or requesting this content is to explain to them the consequences, because there's some really harsh laws in regards to child pornography, even if a child is 16 and they're sending it to another 16-year-old. So maybe explaining those consequences would be, huge.
También quisiera añadir que hay en muchas ocasiones que este tipo de comportamiento vienen porque los niños o los estudiantes no saben que lo que ellos están haciendo en realidad no está correcto. En muchas ocasiones cuando nosotros estamos dando este tipo de entrenamiento a estudiantes y decimos que bajo la ley no se está supuesto a mandar ningún tipo de foto desnudo y demás, muchos de los estudiantes no saben que esto está en contra de la ley. Así que puede ser cuestión de hablar y tener estas conversaciones dejándoles saber que estas son cosas que no se pueden hacer y por qué.
Can you, I'm sorry, I might have missed the slide or anything like that, but can you share what might be some consequences, even if it's just like 2 or 3?
Consequences in what sense?
Laws around distributing
laws.
child pornography.
Okay.
So the degree in which the law is enforced varies. However, if you're charged and convicted, you could become a registered sex offender. Most of the time, if it's a child, so a minor sending the picture, they're not required to be a lifetime registered offender. But typically that's kind of how it ends up. There could also be an additional fine. And if it is considered mass distribution, there's also like jail time associated with that as well.
So, hay diferentes tipos de niveles en los cuales esto puede pasar. En muchas ocasiones, cuando el niño es menor, no se requiere de que esté registrado en lo que es la lista de lo que son de ofensas sexuales. También, can you go back, Ali, and repeat it again? I disconnected for a little bit.
So if it's typically if it's a minor sending the picture to another minor, the law is not entirely enforced, but you could end up being a lifetime registered sex offender or just a registered sex offender for a short amount of time.
Bien. Si es un menor enviando una fotografía o material a otro menor, por lo general la ley no se aplica con todo el peso, pero en algunas ocasiones puede que el niño o la persona sea registrada, ya sea por un periodo de tiempo en la lista de ofensores sexuales o por toda una vida.
And I would say the consequences with that too of how that affects moving forward, like a lot of schools, you can get kicked out of school if this situation's taking place in terms
Also
of looking
scholarship.
In terms of looking for jobs. I mean, this is something that kids might not think when they're sending a nude photograph. They're not thinking about how that could affect their life for their entire life, but it's something that really does continue throughout their lives.
Y en algunas ocasiones, quizás la persona que está mandando la foto no sabe las repercusiones que tiene que puede tener a largo plazo. Puede afectar en la escuela, puede afectar con lo que son las becas y también puede afectar en cuestiones de trabajo.
We do have a question. Has this presentation been given to our students in Providence schools?
We are trying and we want to desperately. But we are working in collaboration, and this is one of the efforts that we're doing right now. So we are working in collaboration with the Parent Academy and also with social emotional services, just to see how we can keep distributing this information. But yes, there is a form of this training that is designed for students.
So, mi pregunta fue o la pregunta del padre fue que si esta presentación se ha ofrecido a los estudiantes de Providence.
Y la respuesta fue que sí, que nosotros queremos hacerlo. Tenemos mucha ilusión de hacerlo. Una de las cosas que estamos haciendo es trabajando en colaboración, como lo hicimos en el día de hoy, con la Academia de Padres y también con el servicio a los estudiantes. Con los servicios a los estudiantes, tanto emocionales y como de apoyo.
I guess one more question that I have, because I'm just waiting to see if anyone has raised their hand. No one yet. In terms of pornography, is there any type of picture that could be taken that someone could actually think is okay, but it's not really okay? Or is it always that it's either the person is naked or anything like is there something that right now parents should be aware that it's not just about showing skin and
when we talk about sexting, we say sexually explicit image, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a nude photo. Typically, when we talk about child pornography laws, we're really talking about nude pictures. Now, if the picture, if it's very clear that the picture is a child and the purpose of the picture is to arouse someone, then yes, that can also be considered child pornography.
Okay.
Cuando nosotros hablamos de
La
sexting,
pregunta, Jamie. Haz
Sí.
la pregunta. ¿Tú quieres?
No, you do it, because I don't have it.
Sorry. Hice la pregunta, es solamente, creo que es algo básico, pero al mismo tiempo creo que es una pregunta importante. Hice la pregunta sobre la palabra pornografía, que normalmente la reacción rápida es que uno piensa de una vez que tiene que ver con alguien desnudo. Entonces, quise preguntar que si existe alguna manera donde la foto no tiene que ser necesariamente que la persona está desnuda.
Cuando nosotros hablamos de sexto o de sexting, estamos hablando de material sexualmente explícito. Pero cuando nosotros hablamos de pornografía, estamos hablando de un material que ha sido diseñado con el propósito de excitar a la persona que lo está consumiendo. Entonces, eso sí sería pornografía.
Okay. I don't have any more questions. If anyone has any questions, please do not be shy. You can raise your hand right now or write your question. And obviously our panelists are experts in this area. So please, let's try to maximize this opportunity. If you have any questions, any concerns, again, please raise your hand or write your question.
What we're going to do now is that we're going to be sharing the
We have
folder.
one.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, that
Do
we
you
are
want to
going,
share screen? Go ahead.
no, we're going to take the opportunity to share the folders where you guys can find the resources. Yeah.
Oh, you're going to put it on the
Yeah, we're going to put it on the chat. Derek, can you get the English one and I get the Spanish one?
Okay. So in the meantime, we're going to ask Pelula if he actually raised his hand.
It's Pelelua.
Pelelua.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this meeting. And I wrote my question on QS. We really appreciate for this information. But my first question is that how can this information be transformed to public? How can the public, because I know not every parent are on this line, and this information is very fertile and is very useful, mostly for every parent that have underage children. So how can this information get to parents? One, then how often is this meeting? Because I remember on Tuesday, I get a notice, maybe 2 minutes to 6 o'clock that there is a meeting. And today again, I get another one around that 6 o'clock that there is a meeting. So how often is this meeting? Then if it is every week or maybe twice in a week or twice in a month, let us have awareness so that we will be prepared. Now I'm supposed to have a meeting by 7 o'clock, but because of this important meeting, I cancel that. Then Tuesday also, I have class by that 6 o'clock. So the hour they put the meeting was so clash with my own time. So I don't know how we can work that together because this important information we need it. I know I have my children, they don't have any problem by now, but prevention is better than care, cure.
That's
So
right.
I don't want them to have the problem, but since I have the information now, I can train them, I can give them the information, I can let them know what to do before any problems comes out. So that's my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pelelua, so I'm going to translate your question, and then I will respond to your question. And I'll also ask our folks here from Day One if they can also share, how you promote Day One and your programs, because you did share that you have a lot of services, which is wonderful. So basically, your question, Pelelua, I'm going to translate it. La pregunta de la señora Pelelua era básicamente que esta información es bien importante, que cómo es que esta información se promueve, vamos a decir, públicamente, para que las otras personas se puedan enterar. Ella habló también y que frecuentemente se ofrecen estas reuniones. Ella dijo que sí, también supo de la reunión del martes, y recibió la notificación, pero también era un conflicto con algo personal con ella, otra reunión que tenía, y claro, no podía asistir, y recibió también la notificación de esta reunión. And so basically, how frequent are these meetings? So again, this is the Parent Academy. These are offerings from the Parent Academy, the Spring Parent Academy. So we've been offering them since March. So de nuevo, esta es la academia de padres. Lo hemos ido ofreciendo desde marzo, mediado de marzo, so mid-March. And so we have several workshops that are happening this month. So 2 were offered this week, 2 will be offered next week, and then 1 more after the April break during the month of April. But then we will have another 4 in the month of May. What I want to make sure that you are receiving, and we will be doing a poll. We're going to ask our parents that are on the call to find out, how did you find out about tonight? Okay, because one of the things that we're using is a new tool that we have, which is Kimvo. It's a texting tool that we have. So because we have access to your phone numbers as a school district, because you are parents of children that are enrolled in the district, we send you the notification and the link of the Zoom, right? So we give you the Zoom link. So all you have to do is click on it. But we also add another attachment, and that is the flyer that has the list of all the workshops along with dates. And it's also in English and in Spanish. So please make sure that if you received the text, to make sure that you save the link that we shared with the flyer. So then that way you can go ahead and save the dates on your calendar, your personal calendar. De nuevo, lo que le acabo de responder sobre la frecuencia, vamos a decir, de los talleres. Estos son talleres que desde marzo lo estamos ofreciendo, mediados de marzo. Tenemos 4 este mes, 5 este mes y 4 el próximo mes de mayo. Pero tuvimos 2 esta semana, esta es la segunda. La próxima semana vamos a tener 2, martes y jueves, y entonces en mayo 4 más. Algo que vamos a hacer ahora en un ratito es también preguntarle a ustedes cómo supieron de este taller. Van a ver algo que le va a aparecer en su pantalla, un poll, no sé cómo dice en español, pero es para...
Una encuesta.
Como una encuesta, ¿verdad? Para que vayan a escoger cuáles son la manera en cómo supieron de hoy. Entonces, queremos que ustedes sepan también que cuando ustedes reciben la notificación, es una herramienta que hemos invertido ahora como distrito, donde es una herramienta con el texto, ¿verdad? Porque sabemos que ahora mismo nos estamos comunicando bastante por ese medio. Pues cuando reciben el texto, también reciben el enlace del Zoom, pero también reciben el enlace del anuncio, que es un flyer, ¿verdad? El anuncio que tiene la lista de todos los talleres y está en inglés y en español. Entonces, cuando ustedes miran esos 2 enlaces, por favor, guarden la información. The Zoom link is actually the same Zoom link for every workshop. So you pretty much have to save your date and then also save the link, and you can just jump, on the workshop right away. De nuevo, cuando ustedes reciben esta notificación, el enlace de Zoom es el mismo enlace para cada reunión. Entonces ya no tienen que ir a otro enlace o grabar el otro enlace. En este caso es el mismo enlace, solamente tienen que guardar la fecha.
Janet,
Yeah. Go
in
ahead.
terms of us, we
Yes.
have a commitment and we are open to doing this presentation, not only for the school setting, but we also are connecting with the community. If we have that commitment, let's say for a church or for a specific group where we're going to have 10 to 15 people at least, we will come in and we will do this presentation if we have if we will have the participants. En realidad, para nosotros, nosotros tenemos un compromiso con la comunidad. Nosotros únicamente no nos presentamos con los departamentos escolares. Si hay algún tipo de iglesia o algún tipo de grupo dentro de la comunidad donde se nos asegure que nosotros podemos tener de 10 a 15 participantes, nosotros podemos hacer la presentación y nuestras presentaciones son gratuitas, ¿no? Son totalmente libres de costos. So all our presentations are free of charge.
Okay. So right now we don't have any other questions and no one has raised their hand. So I think we're going to now ask you if you have any additional comments before we exit, but I'm also asking parents not to leave because this information is very important. We want to hear from our parents that have joined the call this evening. We have a Google form, which is a feedback form that we would like for you to complete. It's very short, it's 6 questions, but we need to hear from you that, you know, how did you feel about this workshop? Did you find it useful, helpful? And definitely we've already heard from some of our families that it was helpful. And so we want to be able to build from this. And so there is already some collaboration that's happening between Day One and Providence Schools and the Family Engagement Office. So forward to continuing building that collaboration. And so please do not leave the call. I'm going to let Day One, you know, provide us with some last comments, and then we will proceed with the Google form. And then we also have some giveaways. So please do not leave because we worked hard to get these sponsorships, okay? So we want to make sure to give them away. So en español, vamos ahora a darle unos segundos al equipo de Day One para que den unos últimos comentarios, pero básicamente, por favor, no se nos vayan porque nosotros tenemos ahora 2 cosas más antes que se vayan, pedirle a ustedes su opinión, sugerencias sobre este taller. Queremos mejorar, queremos ampliar esta colaboración que tenemos con la agencia de Day One y necesitamos escuchar más de ustedes. So, por favor, van a ver en un ratito en el chat, van a ver el enlace para que puedan abrir esa encuesta. Y además tenemos también unos premios, un sorteo que vamos a tener con algunos premios y regalitos que nosotros queremos compartir con ustedes. Entonces, no vayan. Entonces, now if Day One, if everyone wants to say one last word, and then you guys are welcome to go and, you know, enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you all very much for joining us. We appreciate it. And please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need any follow-up. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to be here tonight.
Thank you. No one else? No? We're good? Okay, el señor Derek dijo gracias. Okay.
Muchísimas gracias, buenas noches y esperando que haya sido de su agrado.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, everyone. So let's get started with, first we have the poll. So el sorteo, por favor, vamos a tener ahora mismo como un sorteo, lo tienen en la pantalla. You see a poll right on your screen. The question is, how did you hear about tonight's workshop? Please tell us, how did you hear? So select any of these options. These are all the methods that we utilize right now to get the word out. So we want to understand, you know, what worked for you. So de nuevo, esta información está en inglés y en español. Esta es la pregunta. Queremos saber cómo supieron de este taller. Está en inglés y en español. Díganos de qué modo ustedes supieron de este taller. Estos son los modos que nosotros utilizamos ahora mismo para poder mandarle la información para que sepan de estos talleres. Y le vamos a dar algunos minutos o segundos. Por favor, háganlo lo más rápido posible porque queremos llegar al sorteo de los premios que tenemos. Ok, por favor, Necesitamos que contesten otros. Tenemos como algunos 15 personas que han respondido. Necesitamos algunos más. We have about 15, 16 folks that have responded to this poll. If, again, it's a very short poll. All you have to do is just select which is the method that was most helpful for you to actually join our Zoom. So please let us know. 15?
17.
Okay. All righty. So I think that's good. We're going to now move forward with our giveaways. Okay, so thank you so much for letting us know how you heard about tonight. And so if you go to your chat, si va al chat ahora mismo, miren al chat y van a ver el enlace. You're going to see the link. The Google form is on there. Okay, the link is there. Please just press on it and it will open up and the questions are in English and Spanish. De nuevo, este es el enlace para que ustedes nos den su opinión, sus sugerencias. La pregunta solamente son 6 y está en inglés y en español. De nuevo, necesitamos saber cómo ustedes se sienten después de recibir esta información. We want to know, again, your thoughts, your opinion about how you felt about, the information that was shared with you this evening. If it was helpful, what do you think about it? Do you feel like it should, it should be something that we should continue? Or how could we improve? So your feedback is super important. We're going to give you a few minutes to, again, share your feedback. You will see a timer now on the screen. We're giving you like 5 minutes to be able to respond. And in the meantime, I'm going to just again remind you that we do have a few other workshops coming up next week. We have Exploring Healthcare Careers on April 13th. And we also have Virtually Advocating for Your Child on April 15th. De nuevo, la próxima semana nosotros tenemos 2 talleres más. Estos talleres el día 13 de abril, explorando carreras en cuidado de la salud. También cómo abogar virtualmente por su niño. Ese es abril 15. So we just want to make sure that you don't miss out on this opportunity. Obviously, after the 15th, we have April break vacation. So that week of April 19th, we are actually closed as a district. Well, actually, a few administrative offices are open. Entonces, la semana del 19, nosotros estamos cerrados, vamos a decir, pero algunas oficinas administrativas sí están a su disposición. And then the last workshop during the month of April is on April 27th. El último taller de este mes es abril 27. And the name of that workshop is Managing Daily Stresses for Families. Entonces, el tópico para el día 27 de abril es cómo manejar el estrés diario para las familias. So remember, everyone, again, we're waiting. We have 3 more minutes here. Make sure that you complete the Google form. Again, it's only very, 6 simple questions. They're in English and Spanish. We want everyone to please give us your feedback. Just remember that the Zoom link that you used for tonight, it's the same Zoom link that you will be using for the workshops next week and for the ones that are coming up in the future. Again, do not forget that you will be notified. You should be expecting a text, also an email. You provided your email before you got on the Zoom today. So we are planning to also use that method to make sure that you, again, are reminded of these workshops. We know that they are so helpful. We know that today, for the families that obviously were not able to join us this evening, we will proactively share the video. We are recording this live. Again, the video will be available on YouTube, the Providence Parent Academy YouTube page. So please, if you want to go ahead, and it won't be on there tonight, it'll be on there tomorrow. And so if you know of anyone else that probably, planned to be here tonight, but was not able to, please make sure that you can tell them that they can find the video on the YouTube page of Providence Schools Parent Academy. So we have 2 more minutes. We want to see how many folks have responded. We have
7.
responded to the Google form. Okay, so come on now. We have like 20 people here. We need more of you to please respond to this Google form. We really need to give your feedback back to the superintendent. He obviously is very excited about the academies and the offerings that we're offering all our families. So we really need to be able to share feedback, not only to the superintendent, to the school board, others that just want the Parent Academy to continue to grow and to be successful. So please give us your feedback. I mean, it's the only thing that we need to make sure that we can get better. So make sure that you have another minute and a half. I wanted to remind you also that the Family Engagement Office is the office that is coordinating these Parent Academies. So we are looking forward to seeing any additional comments that you share on the Google form. If you have any other ideas of other topics that you would like for us to share, please, we want your feedback. So please make sure that you share what other topics you think might be helpful to you, to others. And so again, the Family Engagement Office is located at 379 Washington Street. So in a few minutes, we're going to get started to show you what are these giveaways that we have available. And those winners for tonight will have to coordinate with us, and we will call you and reach out to make sure that we can coordinate a time and date for you to actually come and pick up your prizes. Okay, so we're excited. It's almost time. The timer is running out. Okay, so again, we want to thank you so much for staying with us. I know that this is going a little bit longer, so we're going to do the drawing very quickly. So please stay on board. Do not leave. It's about, I'm sorry.
We have 11.
Okay, so we have about 11 folks that responded. That's okay. If you still have time, if you're still doing this, I'm hoping that you all have access to the link. It's on the chat. So make sure that you complete it. Even if you open the link and you haven't taken the time, it's okay. If you want to wait till we actually end our call and complete it, then that's okay too. We will receive it. Okay, so thank you so much. The timer is done. So what we're going to do now is do the drawing. So this actually means that those of you who completed the Google form will be entered into this drawing. And so we want to make sure that you understand that if your name does not appear, it's because you did not complete the drawing. The link is still on. So I just want to make sure before we do this drawing, if you want, we'll wait another second. So again, the names of folks that did complete the feedback form will be those who are participating in the drawing. Okay, so alrighty, so we're going to, if you can just look at your screen, you will now notice there's a wheel. It'll have the name of the folks that completed the Google form. And so you can see in front of you, in the first prize, it will be the family 4-pack of free admission tickets to Roger Williams Park Zoo. So again, these are 4-pack free admission tickets. And Rosa González ganó el premio de 4 tickets gratis al Parque Roger Williams del Zoológico. Okay, the next prize is the $10 Walmart gift card. Ahora un certificado de $10 a la tienda Walmart. Para la próxima persona. Okay, Fanny Flores. Fanny Flores ganó la tarjeta de $10 de Walmart. Great. Qué bueno. Now, the next 2 prizes, it's the family 4-pack of free admission tickets to Roger Williams Park Zoo. Al Parque Canela Jaime, de nuevo 4 tickets gratis para el Parque Roger Williams y Zoológico. The next prize is, again, a family 4-pack free admission tickets to Roger Williams Park. Adrian, congratulations. So, Adrian, okay, I think you gotta let that roll, continue to roll. The next prize is $10 Walmart gift card. De nuevo, el próximo premio es $10 a la tienda de Walmart. Okay, Kimberly, congratulations, Kimberly. All righty, and the last prize that we have is the Nice Slice $25 gift card. This is a restaurant right on Westminster Street, a pizza place. Este es $25 de un certificado. And congratulations to Esther Dupree. Okay, So thank you so much. Congratulations to all our winners. In order to claim your prize, we will be calling you as long as you gave us your phone number. We have your email as well. And so we will be calling you as of tomorrow. So please be on the alert from our, from our office here. So that way we can coordinate to see how, and when you are able to come by and pick up your prizes. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.